There are an estimated 3.5 trillion fish in our oceans, which leaves us with a lot of unknowns about what actually lives down there. And we've discovered photographs of some of the most disturbing sea creatures ever caught on camera. The question, were they spawned by an even more disturbing man-made disaster? This is the Barents Sea, located between Russia and the North Pole. It's one of the most remote and unexplored places on Earth. And one deep-sea fisherman there has brought creatures to the surface that are so bizarre, his Instagram account has made headlines. Fish with bulging lips, what looks like human dentures, and fluorescent red-colored eyes. Creatures with heads shaped like aliens. The images are so bizarre, and there are so many of them. Journalist MJ Banayas, who covers the unexplained, says it's made people wonder if there's something unnatural going on below.
These creatures look so bizarre that people naturally question something's wrong. One theory is that these aren't natural animals, but rather the product of some sort of bizarre mutation.
Look again for yourself. Mutation seems like a reasonable explanation for this. And it turns out the idea of mutated Russian fish may not be far-fetched, as our military expert Tim McMillan explains.
Any government that has any kind of nuclear proliferation program has always had this problem of how do you get rid of your waste? And for a number of years, the Soviet Union's answer was dumping it into the Barents Sea. 17,000 nuclear containers, multiple different nuclear-powered ships were sunk, and an entire nuclear submarine. From a period of about the 1950s until the collapse of the Soviet Union.
Whoa. So the Soviets used the Barents Sea as a nuclear toilet bowl for decades. And as our physicist Dr. Hakeem Oluseyi explains, radiation and DNA don't mix.
Radiation is really tiny subatomic particles that are flying along. And when they encounter a DNA molecule, they can strike it and break it and change it. So when DNA is subject to radiation, then what happens is the instructions for writing a new animal are changed. So you could end up with anything virtually.
A recent scientific study found that a Soviet nuclear submarine at the bottom of the Barents Sea was nearly 1 million times more radioactive than previously estimated. So are these freaky fish the result of all that dumping? Our marine biologist, Dr. Shay Conger, looks for answers. Conger looks first at the fish's shape and scales.
If these fish were impacted by radiation, we would expect to see strange bumps or protrusions on different parts of the body. But I don't see any signs of radiation sickness or poisoning throughout this animal. Its epidermal tissue actually seems to be pretty intact.
Okay, so Conger says these fish aren't the victims of a nuclear waste dump. But then what else could explain some of these bizarre features? Conger has a theory.
They undergo a process of what we call barometric trauma.
It turns out that some of these fish have the bends. When human divers come up too quickly from the deep, the change in pressure causes the gases in their body to expand. Well, same for fish.
Often these fish will come to the surface with their stomachs sticking out of their mouth because of the extreme pressure of having the gases within their body tissues expand at such a quick rate.
But there's got to be more to this fish story, right? Conger says the real story was millions of years in the making.
Each species on Earth has a very predictable and well-defined evolutionary pathway that makes it what it is today. These animals aren't alien, they're just adapted to an extremely different environment than we're used to.
The jury is still out about the long-term effects this contamination will have on marine species. Dr. Conger cautions that the impact could take decades to be fully felt. For us, natural evolution and the bends explain these weird-looking fish. So our verdict? This is a non-nuclear phenomenon.
In February 2021, a fisherman named Abdullah Nurin in Indonesia's East Nusa Tenggara province pulls in a shocking haul. He takes it home and records this video. The footage shows a deceased baby shark with eerily human-like facial features propped up on a sofa. The strange creature is about the size of a human hand and appears to have a wide, gaping mouth big round eyes and a human-like look of surprise.
We've heard of deformities in all species, really, but this is quite unnerving.
Perhaps radioactivity is a factor here. In February 2020, high contamination levels were detected near an Indonesian nuclear research facility in Serpong.
Chernobyl had marked increases in their gene mutation and deformities of animal and plant life. So the mutant shark, I could see that being the result of excess radiation and nuclear waste.
A quick warning that some viewers might find the following images disturbing. In 1990, around 400 deformed animals were born in Chernobyl. Most deformities were so severe the animals only lived a few hours. Examples of defects included facial malformations, extra appendages, abnormal coloring, and reduced size.
So what exactly is going on in the waters of Indonesia that created that strange shark?
Is it nuclear radiation? Or is there a more natural explanation? We'll turn it over to our experts to decide. Biologist Dr. Floyd Hayes begins his analysis by trying to determine if the human-faced shark is even real.
It has an unusually large and wide head. The eyes do not look like normal eyes. And you could also see a very unnatural-looking line at the bottom, and it looks like a mask that has been placed over the head of a normal shark.
However, our zoologist, Roxy Furman, respectfully disagrees.
The texture of its skin looks very real to me. It would be very hard to recreate something this well, I think, without noticing any flaws in texture.
But Furman and Dr. Hayes can agree on what wasn't the cause of this oddity.
There's been nuclear waste dumping in the region, which can cause mutations in animals. But if it was something that had been a mutation as a result of radiation or something, you'd expect to see lumps across the skin or other indications of deformities rather than just what we're seeing in this video.
See the twisted and gnarled limbs of the stillborn piglet from Chernobyl? This is what Furman is talking about. It's caused by damaged or broken DNA molecules which produce the mutation. Mutated DNA can also result in tumors. If a mutation occurs in an egg, it can result in a non-viable embryo or one with serious birth defects. So if it's not nuclear radiation causing these deformities, then what is? Could the shark simply be too young?
This is a result of overfishing. It's a result of bycatch. It looks like a real animal to me. It's just premature. So we're seeing an animal here that's not yet fully formed, something that's not had the full phase of development.
Marine biologist Dr. Shay Conger disagrees. She points out that a premature shark would look scrawny and malnourished. Instead, she thinks it suffers from a rare malady.
This looks to me very typical of something called cyclopia. That's where the brainstem doesn't develop normally. We'll often see deformities around the head area because organs like our eyes are really directly connected to our brain itself.
Cyclopia gets its name from the Cyclops, the one-eyed monster from Greek mythology. It occurs in roughly 1 in every 250 embryos, often resulting in stillbirth. In this case, Conger says that's why this shark's eyes are on the underside of the head instead of on top where they should be. She agrees with Furman that people are to blame, but in this case, the problem isn't overfishing, it's overdumping.
Your everyday pollution from things like plastics or industrial runoff are much more common in the ocean and very readily cause these types of defects. I would say this shark is just subject to a type of normal pollution that resulted in it not dividing normally and ending up in this type of condition.
So we have a broad divergence of opinion here. Our experts aren't even unanimous about whether this thing was real. We're going to rely on our marine biologist here. She specializes in this stuff. Our verdict? We're looking at a birth defect caused by pollution. Sadly, given how badly we're trashing our oceans, that just makes the most sense.
It's May 2017 in Indonesia's Maluku province. Locals are heading out to work when they make a gigantic, gruesome discovery floating in the water. Cell phone video shows them examining the rotting corpse of a 50-foot dead sea creature that has somehow washed ashore. Here's a look from another angle. The formless blob is not only immense, it looks like it's coated in some sort of white, shaggy hair. What kind of animal has hair like that?
It seems like it's something that shouldn't exist. And in fact, if this animal were terrestrial, it wouldn't be able to exist because of its sheer body mass.
Folklore is chock full of legendary sea creatures as big as this carcass. The ancient Hebrew Leviathan, the Jormungandr of Norse mythology, and the Kraken, a kind of giant octopus, so big it was described as a floating island in Viking eyewitness accounts.
Oh man, I bet that stinks there.
But field researcher Cliff Barrickman says these carcasses have their own name.
Globsters. Globsters are cool in every way. It's part blob, it's part glob, it's part lobster. I mean, how awesome is that?
Globsters have been turning up on shores around the globe for years. This one, known as the Cherbourg carcass, was discovered in France in 1934. But what to make of this one?
Globsters have also washed up on beaches in Florida, New Zealand, Bermuda, Canada, and South Africa, but they've never been spotted in the water alive. So what exactly are we looking at here? Let's turn to our analysts.
Wildlife biologist Lucy Eckersley first focuses on that amorphous mass of tissue.
I think these could be mistaken for lots of different sea animals, and because they look kind of squishy, you might think that they look like a giant octopus or a giant squid.
A giant squid? But look.
We can see some exposed bone.
This video clearly shows this creature has a spine, so it can't be an invertebrate. Next question, what to make of that hair?
What looks like hair across this creature is actually fibers of collagen.
Marine biologist Dr. Shay Conger says that collagen, a protein that provides structure to skin, bones, and tendons, is the biggest clue.
When components of the body begin to break down, the collagen begins to emerge. And because collagen doesn't break down as quickly as other tissues, these globsters can start to take on a hairy appearance that you wouldn't expect or be able to explain if you weren't familiar.
So what was this before the sea decomposed it into a globster?
This is actually pretty typical of what I would expect to see in regards to the carcass of a large whale. You can see some striations on the bottom of this object, and that is what we would expect to see in the mouth cavity of a large whale, such as a blue whale.
And Conger should know. As you can see, she's been up close and personal with globsters herself.
To witness firsthand one of these animals at close distance, to the human mind, is almost unsurmountable. You're looking at the scale of an animal that's bigger than anything that's ever lived on the planet. And so to unpracticed eyes, they seem absolutely impossible.
Ultimately, this story is about the power of the sea. In this case, its power to transform the bodies of dead animals into something unrecognizable. And once that hair was explained to us, it became clear. Our verdict, the globster is not the kraken or a sea monster. It's a dead whale.
It is early August 1996 in the industrial town of Kishtim in the Russian Ural Mountains. While investigating a robbery, police detective Vladimir Bendlin stumbles upon a shocking discovery. A local woman shows him a grotesque creature that makes his stomach turn.
В квартире находился, значит, такой запах необычный. Ну, какой-то мускусно-сладкий такой тошнотворный запах.
It was around 10 inches long and hairless. It had brownish, grayish skin, a really strange skull with ridges and protruding eyes. The woman said she'd found the creature weeks earlier near a cemetery still alive. She lovingly dubbed it Alashenka and said her family cared for it for a few weeks until it finally died. Bendlin says the woman's mental state was questionable and the details of her story inconsistent, but he still needed to identify this body.
Вот, ну, показали чисто вот визуально сотрудникам городской больницы Кыштымской.
A first examination of the specimen determined it was likely a human fetus. But Detective Bendlin took it to a pathologist for a second opinion. And according to forensic investigator Chase Klotsky, the evidence was anything but clear.
There are several things missing. Ears, nose, genitals. Probably the most striking piece that we found that really puzzles everybody is it's absolutely absent of a navel.
No belly button? That's odd. But perhaps there's an equally unusual explanation.
In 1957, there was a disaster at a military facility near Kishtim. There was an explosion in a tank where nuclear waste was stored, and it sent a radioactive plume over many nearby villages. Some have speculated that Alushenka might be a deformed fetus caused by the fallout from that disaster.
Detective Bendlin also brought the body to someone he hoped could determine if perhaps Alushenka was not of this earth at all.
He did eventually give the mummified corpse to some UFO investigators.
But the case then took another strange turn.
After which, it vanished without a trace. So now, only videos and photos of Alushenka survive.
The Kishtim explosion was actually the worst nuclear disaster until Chernobyl, but the Soviet government didn't come clean about it until 1989. So is Alushenka linked to the fallout? Was it a visitor from somewhere even further away? Our experts are on the case.
Science writer Mick West weighs the theory that this is some kind of extraterrestrial specimen.
It looks a bit alien-like. But the thing about aliens in popular culture is they often look like babies. They have big bulbous heads, and they have small bodies, and they have skinny limbs.
West thinks the creature's inhuman eyes and head are most likely explained by the Kishtim disaster.
I think what we have is a badly deformed child because of mix-up in the genetic code. It could be something that came from radiation in that area.
But anthropologist Kathy Strain thinks the creature predates the 1957 explosion by millennia.
It looks like it's a human infant that died in childbirth. Its head is cone-shaped like that due to the birthing process. And eventually, they became mummified. I do not believe that this woman had this alive for 3 weeks. It is clearly very old, maybe even 1,000 years old.
Interestingly, the woman who claims to have found this specimen alive was eventually taken to a psychiatric facility. But Detective Bendlin says family members who backed up her story seemed entirely trustworthy.
Ну, тут как судить? В принципе, мало ли что, тут сложно. А может, на самом деле было, я не берусь вот рассуждать, и установить не представилось возможным.
All right, this one continues to be confounding. Based solely on the video evidence, our verdict is that Alushenka is a mummified infant. However, until the body is recovered and a DNA test is performed, we can't say for sure.